Warning: this video is not for kids. Video contains materials inappropriate for viewers under the age of 13. If you're a kid, click out now. This channel does not sponsor any kids content. All the contents are for viewers aged above 13. Children are not the primary audience for this channel or this video. Once again, this video is not for kids. It contains materials inappropriate for viewers under the age of 13. So if you are somebody below 13, you should not watch this, nor you should observe the contents of this channel.
So the days regarding the mgtow movement and the truther community in general might come to an end, and mgtows might be endangered species of men, as how the situation is turning in the political and ideological spectrum. The way this is going on is because of various reasons. Some of the reasons are due to political, some of the reasons are due to mgtow's own flawed logic, and some of the reasons are happening because other groups are getting manipulated to attack the mgtow movement. Now, this is a very broad topic, and this is a very controversial topic, and it is hard to describe clearly without giving credit where it is due or naming the powerful political groups that are involved with getting different sides to fight each other. So this video will be out of context, and it would not have the proper materials that can give a clear explanation of what is going on. And the problem is that mgtow has flaws of its own, and mgtow dissenters, some of them are controlled, have flaws of their own, and mgtow ideology has its own flaws. So the problem is that without talking about the key mechanism, without talking about the puppet masters or the key mechanism of what is going on behind the scenes, the entire thing would be out of context. But we can be clear about it that if mgtows get prosecuted or censored or annexed or outcasted from society and social places, it would lead to greater problems for other communities, and it would affect other communities if the hatred and the attack of mgtows continue, because they would not stop at one group. And in some ways this is a blessing, because by targeting the mgtow, what the elites have done is that they have created a situation which would harm them. Because if you let deflecting problems and promoting witch hunt against mgtow, what would happen is that the hatred that is spawned from the people and the cults against mgtow would not stop there. And this is a very important thing, because after mgtow they would always find somebody to blame about what is going on in society, and that somebody might as well be elite. So what they are doing is digging their own grave, and this is something which would bury and destroy the truther movement for at last. This is the final coup de grace. It is not the controlled opposition. It is not corrupting of the leaders of the truther movement. It is this deflecting towards other harmless groups. I would not call mgtow harmless, because it is a very dangerous ideology and it can harm people. it can lead to insults and something like that. You can debate that, but the problem is that by promoting extreme hatred against one group, you are setting a precedence which would be used to target your own group when you are no longer politically useful, or when you no longer have value as a proxy warrior or as a subversion agent, or when you have no longer a value as a civilian, or any means to any ends. So this is a very dangerous path the truthers are taking. This is a very dangerous path where people are being manipulated to target mgtows, and this would send mgtow to a very dark place from which they cannot return, because when you are shutting down all criticism and labeling them as something which is hate, you are breeding hate, because hatred can only breed hatreds, and persecution can only lead to persecution of yourself. So what most people are doing is lighting a match, is setting a spear to a destination which would harm all people in society, whether or not they conform to the sociological standard, whether or not they conform to the patriarchy or the gynocentry or whatever the elites are feel like pushing these days. And what would happen is that it is something which would affect all the sides, and most of them are being done by control oppositions. Most of them are being done by elites. Some of the problems, some of the hatreds the victors are bringing are being done by themselves, and it is not something that is necessarily being targeted to them because they did something bad or morally wrong. The problem is that the philosophy which mgtow is preaching is not preferable to what society wants, because the foundation of society is built on passing your ideals and reproduction. But what mgtow is asking is that to give men some elevation and some value from society, and to hold women accountable. And what this leads to is that most people do not want to do those things, because as creating the next generation is very, very important, and without creating the next generation, without passing your ideology on to others, without having a stable family unit, what would happen is that it would lead to a disaster that can collapse society as we know it, and it can lead to other people doing things of your society, or other people replacing the men who do not want to form a family. For example, if most people go mgtow and abandon their woman, if most people go vegetarian and abandon their woman, what would happen is that other people who come from different cultures, or other people who do want to form families and would want to be dominated, or who do anything to serve, who would do anything to comply, or somebody like a bunny, what would happen is that they would replace the major replace the people, at least in terms of ideology. They would then form families, and what would happen is that their ability to compromise and to comply and to cooperate would pass to their kids due to nurture, and some argue it is also due to nature. I'm not sure about that. I'm really not sure about that, because a person is more than where he arrives from, and we have seen people from morally bad line of family becoming good, and vice versa. So it is debatable. What would happen is that, if we create a generation of people who are who always compromises and who always cooperates, and who, how can I say this properly, who can always comply and consume whatever you give to them. What would happen is that this would harm the next generation, this would harm society in general, and this would cause your country to get subverted, because we need disagreeable men. Without disagreeable men, if everybody says yes to everything, it would lead to a disaster. And what it would happen is a set of problems which we cannot solve. If people keeps complying to any authority without questioning it, or I'm not saying authority of God, I'm not saying authority which has been set a precedence which have worked in the past over over many years, which have a staple in nature, which is connected with nature. I'm saying authority as something which has been created artificially, or something which can breed conflict, something which is promoted by elites, as something which can lead to depopulation, which is one of the major problem which would become relevant in recent years, which is something which can lead to different groups fighting each other. This is another problem, and which is something which could lead to the majority of population becoming uneducated or not doing good in the job market, and this could be highly problematic. Problematic is a kind way to put it. This can lead to serious issues, and there are other political issues where people are always in conflict about. And what happens is that most of these issues are being blamed at mgtow for some reason which doesn't make sense, because people don't want to name the people or don't want to question the politicians who are pushing this legislation. They would rather deflect to the mgtow community or the incel community or the useful idiot who is compliant to push a narrative, or they would deflect to somebody, some student who uses different dyes of color to dye his or her hair, because it is easy to call people at the surface pedestrian level than at the elite level, and it is easier to deflect things which we see instead of following the money or going to the root of the problem. And this is a very dangerous thing, as I have already said before. And I don't think you should take everything I say for granted, because I may be wrong, and this should be scrutinized and this should be analyzed, and people should post their own criticism or whether you think this is right or not. And I'm not part of this mgtow movement, I'm not part of anything, I'm extremely neutral. And as you see, I do not name the elites, I do not criticize them. I'm in this as a civilian level at the moment. Nobody has hired me to do anything, and I will continue to stay at a civilian level, hopefully, if my luck permits. But if the mgtow community gets into a divide and conquer situation with the other communities, if they get manipulated to attack other groups and vice versa, what this would lead to the destruction of the truther movement. And there are many things in this argument which are different opinions from different people. I cannot name them because if I do, then I'm going to get censored and banned. So I cannot give credit where it is due. This is a problem, please. But criticism can be done in terms of fair use. Do not ban this video. And since I'm talking from area in the morning, there's going to be a lot of background noises. I'm sorry, I cannot help it. Maybe I should just get a better mic, but I can't due to some circumstances. So this is an issue where we have to discuss mm, the different elite group who manipulated the two genders or different genders, if you can believe that, to be at each other's throat for political gains, to create more conflict. Because this is a problem with human resource, using human as a resource, that if they form a large group, you as authority, you cannot rule them. They may replace you with their competency, and so what happens is that you have to pit them against each other, and that's where the problem starts. And it is really easy to deflect our problems at another group instead of solving them, and it is easy to make a small group as scapegoats. This should not happen. We should not only held man or some man accountable, or we should not only hold the poor people accountable for actions and letting the rich get away with it, or we should not hold one race of people accountable for action or another race getting away with it, or even religion, if we can discuss about that. So what this leads to is a sense of hatred and disconnection from society. And if people feel that they do not belong in society, what happens is that they can be contacted with other groups who can use them as tools or sting operations, and they could be used against accelerationism, or they could be manipulated to do extreme things. Or even if they are not manipulated, you can people are going to set them as some boogeymen who have done things which they did not do, and use what people commonly refer to as psyops. The problem is talking about how the elites manipulate the different groups cannot happen without holding the without holding the without holding the females and men's and elites accountable. And it is a very complicated topic to discuss, because you cannot discuss it without using a level of sociopathy, or you cannot discuss it and convince the ladies and the different people who are psychologically different from some group of men, or people who cannot take criticism. You cannot convey what is going on. You cannot convince them how they're being manipulated without using sociopathy and trickery. And the problem is that mgtow do not compromise, they do not lie, they do not trick people, they do not use sociopathy, they do not use trickery. They say things as it is. But how the society have formed these days, by saying things as they are, you are seen as an mentally challenged person. This could lead you to trouble. You could lose your job and other important things. You can be seen a person who does not have any tactics, or tactless person, because how we have conditioned the society to lie and depend on lie for over and over many years, and the amount of social indoctrination that goes, whether not in every country, whether they are in from homes, whether they are in from books, whether they are in from school, whether they are in from politics or the cults people visit, whether they are in their surroundings, because people are being propagated every day with different opinions, and it is hard to determine which one is right and which one we should run away from, and this creates some problems. Okay, let me check what else did I miss. So where was I? Trickery, I talked about it. I talked about sociopathy, and people are not clear about how whether the psychology of the male and female are equal or different, whether every healthy male and female has in their group the same kind of psychology, and whether people should generalize people based on their psychology or not. And this leads to a lot of problem because the mgtow, some of them have a tendency which is to generalize people and say that their psychological structure is like this and this, so all people of that group will be like this because of psychology. And what they do not mention most of the time is that people could have different psychology, because I mean psychologically can be programmed to have a female psychology and vice versa, and people could have conditions in their head which can lead to different psychology which is different from a healthy male or healthy female. By healthy it is being which is common, and people could have different psychology based on their sexuality, and some mgtows agree on it, some mgtows do not agree on it. Some mgtows generalize, some mgtows do not want to see females problem, and this leads to conflict. And for controlled oppositions and other groups and cult leaders, it is often easier to deflect your problem on mgtow, because mgtow, what they are doing is that they are not going to the family, they are not forming families on their own, they are not trying to look for romance in workplace, they are not accepting female authority. What the mgtows are doing is that they want authority and power for their own group. They do not want it to have, they do not want that power on a group that could use it potentially to harm them or harm their interests, and that groups leads to the elites or females. It can also lead to the females. What mgtows are afraid of is of a gynocentric system, or a system without any sexual identity or religious identity. What they're afraid of is an Orwellian system where people's words and reputation of what they said many years ago or what they think could be used to take their jobs, take their rights, could be used to attack them, and people would be forced to follow a certain ideology and certain sexuality. So what mgtows are afraid of is a totalitarian state, Orwellian state, where people enforces their own ideology and enforces their own sexuality, projecting it on other people, which the other people may disagree with. And the totalitarian state may take humans' identity, may take human sexuality, and may treat them as bots or just human resource who do human work without giving their genders or any other agency as an individual or any other agency as a human being to account. And that is what the mgtows are really afraid of, because the amount of trickery, the amount of sociopathy, the amount of psychopathy that has been invested in social communities and political system and many other systems where people get influenced cannot be competed with men being honest or without criticizing the basic foundations of which ideology the subversion agents are doing, without criticizing the basic foundations of feminism, which most people do not want to do, because it would let them eliminated, character assassinated, in some cases assassinated as well, if they go to who pushed the movements and if they name the elites. And it could lead to extreme censorship, it can lead to extremist ideas, because hate breeds hate, extremism breeds extremism. And for most men who always complain, who always are weak, or who are aware with which direction the political power is going, it is going towards different from before. because in the beginning we had patriarchy or patriarchal power. Now the political power is actually going towards gynocentry, but it would not go because the elites would be at conflict with the females in positions of power, with the proxy agents or with the subversion agents they would have elevated, and they would not want their own people to suffer for female life improvement. So what we will have is not a pure gynocentry, we would have an illusion of gynocentry. And what would happen is that the elites will manipulate the woman. Pure gynocentry may appear temporarily, but it will get eliminated because the people who do their part to replace the old world order would be eliminated when the politicians have no use for them, when they have served their purpose. Because what happens in the revolution is that when people know too much, they have done their purpose, they get unpersoned and eliminated. And often innocent people get targeted for thought crime which they didn't do, and become the scapegoat of what happened before, like what we are seeing with MGTOWs getting labeled different vile terms of things they didn't do, things they were things they were forced to take as a part of their ideology. So people are blaming the symptom but not the cause of the symptom, and this is very dangerous. As always, if you think something is wrong with it, you are free to scrutinize it. I'm not naming key figures in different sites because if I do, it would create drama and I would probably get censored for it. Because what is important is spreading the message to people who are neutral, who are unaware, spreading the message to MGTOW that they're being targeted by other groups and controlled oppositions, and it is happening for various reasons.
When it comes down to nature and basic biology of the old times, the idea was that men needed women and women needed men. Even some religious texts claimed men were created to be weak or had weakness for the opposite sex, and that's favorably a good thing. According to majority of people, because it leads to reproduction and more people, so society can be created and function, and society can thus continue to function. Every action has a response or reaction, and the response to correct world politics, subversion, inversion of gender roles, double standards in workplace, trust and belief system, and the court of public opinion, where a person's reputation can be ruined by false allegations or without following the due process. Sexual liberation and feminism have led to mgtow. Mgtow and feminism are like brothers and sisters because there are similarities between the movements. As feminism was supposed to, by their definition, to elevate female and to stop oppression and conformity of the establishment. Some claimed feminism was a psyop of the elites, and elites played a key part in it for various reasons, most not safe to discuss. The basic gist was to exploit women by promising them power and safety. MGTOW was a response to the elites making laws difficult for certain group. It was supposed to protect men and to stop the oppression and conformity of the establishment. Some claimed MGTOW was a psyop of the elites, and elites played a key part in it for various reasons. Most also most reasons are not safe to discuss. The basic gist was to get men out of the reproduction game so females can get selective mates with the preferred ideology. It is incredibly easy to infiltrate the two groups and create discord and subversion inside. It is also easy to break the groups into smaller chunks, creating further chaos, and it may lead to cult-like situations. No matter how secular a society could pretend, having either of the two ideology affects the people getting hired, and different sides have different ideas on how hiring works. Difference of psychology of the two groups create incompatibility. Two groups have some members who want their group to dominate and power. If one group gets power, it will be at the expense of others. So, in general, there are difference of psychology between the male and the female, and it is the difference of the psychology which creates incompatibility. And each of the groups they have member who want to dominate the other partner in the relationship and have power. And in groups like mgtow and feminism, there are members who want their group to dominate and have power. If one group gets power, it will be at the expense of other. It is the intention to lead and not be led is what causes most conflicts. Both groups are in choice of being proxy warriors to bring the nanny state as Islam claims. Since there is a deep hatred between the two groups and incompatibility, even if there is no hatred or was no hatred, it is easy to manipulate the two groups against each other or manipulate one of the groups to attack another in case of privilege and power. To give privilege and power, one of the groups turns into a revolutionary and attacks the other group. And to use these groups as proxy warriors is to bring a nanny state. So basically what a nanny state is, it is an Orwellian state where you have no free will and the government takes care of everything you do. And we have something like that of uh, in YouTube. Whenever somebody does something that is out of line, a lot of you may see having an opinion which is not preferred. Lots of unknown people arrives, which are known as zero subscriber club, or which channels or individuals have no agency other than doing other than attacking the person with a different opinion or using it to bring conformity. So this is what most agents do. They are used as proxy warriors. So in any state, what the agent does is that whenever somebody says something which is out of line, like a thought crime, these people magically appear at different comment section or other places, and they stalk the person and attack the person who disagrees with them. This has often happened to me different times in the past, even though I did not name the elites nor criticize it. But these people are really afraid of people gaining awareness, which causes them to act in a neurotic kind of way, which is pathological. Some people does it for national security, but it is not a discussable topic. So basically your nanny state is something like 1984. At its core, mgtow is not a political group, but the heart of man wants to be free. There are many types of men. Most do not want to be dominated. Some wants to dominate others and maintain control. And this can also apply in relationship. Many some Several men wants to dominate their partner in a relationship. You might find some men who would not admit it, but deep down wants to do it, but are really afraid to dominate the other. Some men wants to dominate others and maintain control of over their lives, maintain control in every situation. And these men are very driven. They follow their own set of rules. That is not to say that they do not follow what is in theology or what is moral or what is given in religion. They could follow an established set of rules, but they follow it like they are bound to it and does not break their oath. And they do not lie, but their behavior and lack of using a mask could be seen as evil because in society, often to maintain peace, people have to lie. Often to maintain a maintain a charade, people take a masquerade of niceness and hide their ugly self from the rest of the society. So the problem with this type of men is that they do not hide their behaviors. If somebody is good looking, they're going to talk about it. If they feel like doing something, they're going to talk about it. They're not going to hide and pretend to be a moral nice, or which is the what is the opposite of lewd, uh, a modest person. And this lack of being a mask, of wearing a mask, this lack of insincerity, this lack of disingenuousness could be seen as evil, and it may create conflict with people who are different. It may create conflict with people who are cunning, who are shapeshifters, or who are like ordinary people, or it can create conflict with people who have something to hide and they do not like when a person with nothing to hide or who doesn't hide anything shows up. This leads to two people getting in conflict with each other. These are the people who judge others a lot and puts everyone into accountability. And accountability is the main problem. And it is a big issue in politics, and which is one of the reasons we are getting censorship and conflict. And it is also why there are conflicts between the truther movement. Just because accountability. In politics, you cannot hold some groups accountable. Perhaps we could say the same about the truther movement. You cannot hold some truthers accountable. You cannot question the authority of the power. And it is that questioning of the authority is what makes countless people being person non grata. Basically, nobody acknowledges their existence. They get outcasted, humiliated, or unpersoned even, fired from jobs. So basically what happens is when a person gets unpersoned, all his existence is removed. There is no record of that person being existed. People forget it. Most people question their own reality. So we could assume that it is a form of gaslighting. And what we can observe, gaslighting is something that shields often do. They project their own faults on others. It is calling to accountability to everyone, not just who rule and those who keep quiet, which has made so mgtow has called everyone to accountability, not just the rulers. It also made people who keep quiet accountable. This has made mgtow an endangered species of humans who must be eliminated because they have their nose where it does not belong. The hornet's nest. There's so many spelling mistakes. Don't know why the part with the nose was funny. The hornet's nest was lit. The hive mind stopped and deconstructed. The hornet's nest. I apologize for laughing about that. The hornet's nest was lit. The hive mind stopped and deconstructed. Many bad decisions were made. Wrong analyses were made. Bear spoke. And what happened was that the mgtow lit the hornet's nest, they poked the bear, they stopped the hive mind, and deconstructed the hive mind. What happened was that mgtow made several bad decisions along the way and also wrong analysis. The most dangerous question that got to mgtow was, are the thoughts that I have are my own? It does not matter whether the questioner was mgtow or not. It quickly became one of the most hated ideas in modern years, as it gave men an excuse to not share their resources. So basically, many of the mgtow members were thinking that whether they have been programmed to become someone who has to literally follow a set of double standards which does not favor their gender, and this, and along with others, that whatever happened to create the conflict between the two sexes was done not due to their own thoughts, but thoughts that were projected by other political or agencies or other groups. And this holding the socio-political, the intelligence agency, and other forms of social programming accountable made it a very hated idea. Some could say even to the vein of a conspiracy. And also analyzing how the society tells people to think instead of setting a good moral standard for them. Men chose to not share their resources in a system that does not benefit him. Men chose to not share their resources in a system that could harm them, if not for themselves, but for their own families or loved ones. Because if somebody who is a parent, if he gets accused or if he gets into a bad relationship, what would happen is that it would affect his family, it would affect people that depend on him financially, and being a nice man and a white knight is something that can potentially harm them and put their loved ones into danger. Like any other group, it became infiltrated. When men felt that they're not going to get anything from society, so they just stopped bothering with sharing resources and gave up with the idea altogether. Like any other group, it became infiltrated. So what happens is that we have people who infiltrate different things. We have people who shield at different things. Some say that there is some, I'm not going to mention it, just going to create conflict. So there are different groups that infiltrate stuff. Some say that even in channels like BitChute, there are agents and other people who infiltrate different movements and different cliques to create certain sort of narrative and create certain sort of political or sociological climate. And the infiltration part is true. This also happens in environment protect groups and other groups. People often infiltrate either for national national security, ideological security, or pushing some sort of ideas, or using people as useful idiots pawn for a certain socio-political objective, or any other objective, or making everything globalized, or beating people to do horrible things to achieve satisfaction for a certain hate, things like that. So, like any group, mgtow became infiltrated. It had members who did not have the best interest of others. It had members who attacked their own followers and preferred to them and called their faults. As I said, these are people who held others accountable, and in some cases they were right. In most cases they were not right. It had trolls. It had extreme people. It had agents of hate, and infighting started various times. Cult-like minds were formed in some mgtow sects. Many people left the movement. Many people were shamed for being too dependent on the movement because it had become something like a support group. And a lot of men's life were ruined. A lot of damaged people entered the movement. So what happened was some people saw these damaged people, some leaders of the movement, and they mocked these damaged people for being damaged. Now, I'm always a skeptic when it comes to victims, but because you should not let somebody who looks victimy into your house, they're going to kick you out and claim that it is theirs and cause other trouble like that. So, or they're going to do something sociopathic. But there are genuine victims in this society. We cannot ignore that. And even bringing somebody who claims to be victim could accuse you of being an attacker, even if you didn't do anything. So this is a very dangerous game. I should not say it is a game, it is a conflict. Many people attacked others, heavily criticized them. It led to other groups of people who claim to know about high social status men but became something like cult and attacked anyone who disagreed with them. Many people left, many people changed their name. There were infighting over sex dolls and the age of said sex dolls, which was suspected to lead to deep issues. And there was also something about red pill coins, which seemed like a scam, and I think a lot of people lost their money. There were accusations of pickup artists infiltrating the ranks, and a lot of other issues which led to infighting. Another problem was whenever somebody who has married or had girlfriend, or somebody who was somebody many did not consider to be real mgtow. Also, there were people who did hookups or people who used prostitutes. They were also not considered to be real mgtow, and some people thought that people who did hookups were pure mgtow. And there were other people who thought that people who are monk who did not had sexual encounters with anyone or anything is the real mgtow. And there were many debates about that, what really mgtow is, even though the most simple definition is often ignored. It's a man going his own way, doing the thing he prefers, not what society expects of them. And whether somebody has a girlfriend can be considered mgtow or not led to one of the conflicts where an a troll without any face attacked Big John, who was a member of the mgtow. Now, Big John's version of mgtow was that a person who had a girlfriend can be considered mgtow if that girlfriend was not somebody who was who would ruin him or a horrible person. And the troll's definition was that the monk who has no encounters with anyone or anything is the real mgtow. And this led to a sort of conflict between the two. Even though John tried to contact him, the other one just kept enforcing his ideals of what mixture should be. And there are many cases of this thing which we see in many mgtow communities of one person enforcing their definition of what mgtow is on others. There are people who use onaism, which basically means um, having sexual pleasure without any other partner, using yourself, or sex dolls, which is something that has been in society recently, or perhaps before, I don't know. And they think that people who do this are the proper mgtows. So there is a lot of conflict about the definition of mgtow, what it is or not, and each branches of these fight each other. Often they are manipulated to fight each other, even they should not. Finger pointing and leading to a support group did not help the ideology. So it basically became a support group for damaged people. Like any other political movement, to try to find people who are damaged, or damaged people slowly joins it to find meaning in their lives. What happens is that these people bring their own flaws with him into this movement and it affects it. And often people can live their sense of morality and claim things which they should not claim. Often infiltrated agents infiltrate this to say extreme things which nobody in their right mind would agree with. And what are these extreme things could be up to your own interpretation. But the long-term effect of the extreme things would be something to discredit the movement and leading it to a manufactured crime which could sabotage the movement, to lead to a political outcome where the victims would be utilized to win an of extreme form of regulation. It had several flaws, but it is hard to talk about the flaws without talking about the cause. It is hard to talk about the cause of the flaws without bringing actions of other actors, including the elites, women, and government, also controlled opposition. In also elites, governments role with feminism and correct world gender roles and the decisions at workplace during hiring and issues like wage gap. So these are all controversial topics, and some argue without bringing the people who lead the philosophy and co-opted it or who run the society. It seems the negotiation was off limits. So in these radical ideas, in these extreme ideas, or how politicians and elites influence the different groups, it is hard to bring the parties involved in some sort of discussion without mentioning the political powers and manipulations the leader use, or what sort of psychological and social engineering goes around here, or which people or which group leads them to make such decisions. And since people are not allowed to think or even talk about that or bring hard evidence with it, so what happens is that this leads to the different groups. This prevents the different groups from having any real negotiation. It is hard to talk about the problem people were in and how they were exploited without mentioning the elites. And criticizing the elites is not a viable option, and as it can be diagnosed as a high conflict person who attacks one group but praises another to keep conflict going. And another thing we should be concerned about is the defense sting operation groups, which are shields which goes in, which tells you about criticizing the elites, or which tells you about the elites but are actually sting operations who are hooking you and trying to put you to prison for criticizing the elites. And some claim that there is something like um, should I name it? Some claim that, okay, it's not in the topic of the video. I will think about it. These made mgtow arguments invalid and out of context, as they do not mention the elites for the fear of financial attack and actual attack. Before my to my first point, high conflict person is a person who attacks one group and praises another to keep conflict going. So it says that one of the parties is good, one person is good, or one group of race is good, and then claims that the other group is bad. So by claiming one group is good, he's trying to take him as an ally. By claiming another group is bad, he's trying to paint her or him as an enemy. So this made mgtow arguments invalid and out of context, as they do not mention the elites for the fear of financial attack and actual attack, and also sting operation, which I mentioned before. And some claim that there is something called uh, 77 Brigade, which has a network of shields who can check information about people who are connected in BitChute. Now I don't know whether this 77 Brigade is good or bad, and I don't want to attack them, or I do not want to point that these people are bad, but there are rumors. Even though it is true or not, there are groups like that who ask people to point their opinions, so with their opinions they can attack it. Because in Machiavelli's book, you cannot attack anyone. You need to create a certain class or group of people in prince that you can attack to keep fear going. If the leaders keep attacking everyone, everyone is going to hate them. They need some people to make examples of, and so they use this controlled opposition. 7 Brigade, if they're in on it. If they're not, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. They use it, them to gather information, or since BitChute is peer to peer, somebody could technically put uh, weird stuff in my network since I'm connected to them. Maybe something that is really horrible and that can get people prosecuted, something immoral, something really bad, something which I do not like, but somebody could put it there to accuse me, or perhaps a virus, or perhaps a tracking device. I honestly don't care because I'm neutral in all this, and I do not criticize or name these people, but a lot of people can be put into danger, and when they eliminate all sorts of truth from the internet, uh, there is no saying whether they would go on for the normal people or for the extremely neutral people who do not do anything on minor offenses or no offenses at all. Just look at what they're doing with COPA. then you would have an idea how ruthless these people are. So the main criticism which mgtow got was that they never name the people elites. That was the topic that was claimed. They often do it for, they often do not name for fear, and mgtows cannot go far in their viewpoint, because we have to remember these are the people who got screwed over by female sociopaths, male sociopaths, female psychopaths, male psychopaths, and healthy females, healthy males. These were the people who were attacked by political groups. These were the people who were destroyed by the court system, and in some cases destroyed by their relationships, and in some cases also destroyed by their nurture. So it would make sense that these people, by getting attacked from different sides, may not have the capacity to look beyond the people attacking them and to see who are privileging them to attack them, or who are financing them to do things which are harming them. Why are the courts doing that? Or why is somebody's false allegation has a lot of meaning? Why are gender roles inverted in society? Why are certain ideals promoted? Why Frankfurt School is celebrated? Things like that. And it is hard to talk about it without pissing off a lot of people, and without getting control of positions, agents lacking your personal information. And these people are really ruthless. They never, uh, well, you know what happens. So the problem was that mgtow could not go in their viewpoint beyond the woman, or beyond the white knight, or beyond the so-called beta male. This made mgtow philosophy stale, as people wanted to know how, who they were being ruled, and reasonable truth. What is reasonable truth? People wanted to know the reality of the situations they were in. mgtows want to engage in families or conformity to, oh, no, no, no. Okay, mgtows do not want to engage in family or conformity in general together. Feminisms also do not want to create family of their own, or engage or create a crate of. Okay, mgtows do not want to engage in family or conformity of the society. Feminisms also do not want to get the conformity of the society, which is the um, traditional gender roles, which was applicable in the medieval ages. They do not want their family of their own. This created a case of interdependence between the two groups, even though we do not want to admit it. One cannot live without the other. One created the other. Without feminism, there would be no mgtow. And without feminism and sexual liberation, mgtows would not be free to not marry or to not share the resources. Even though in this time where not sharing their resources are getting them into huge trouble, it would have been worse had the females were not elevated by the elites, or had the it would have been worse in case that you would have to marry if the social if the sexual liberation did not happen, if the ladies were not elevated, and if the ladies were not allowed to not marry. So by liberating the female, the male also got liberated in some way. which is what which was that they were not forced to marry at the moment. We don't know how this will change in the future. We might not know. Some people think that people are going to be forced to marry or reproduce, but I'm not sure about that. So this created an interdependency between mgtow and feminists. They were like the yin and the yang, the sun and the moon, a glass of Sprite mixed with Coke, having a constant back and forth with many establishment. Supporting one side and eliminating the other did not make much change. So mgtow having a constant argument and debate with the establishment, which devalued the men, debatable, and which tell that men should do what they should do and it is all their fault. This led to a conflict between the two. Key protagonist figures of mgtow were kicked out or silenced. mgtow got some members who hated religion or people who married. Every time topic was mentioned about religion or marriage, different sides would appear and leading to a loop-meet situation which was useless. So mgtow had constant back and forth with the main establishment of the elites. It also had a back and forth with feminism. So mgtow supporting one side of the political party and eliminating the other, or supporting one certain ideals and eliminating the other, did not make much change into the society. And key figures of mgtow were kicked out and silenced. Many people disappeared. Many people changed their name. Many people stopped becoming mgtow. Many people knew that this movement was redundant and just to become more went on to just be normal average person and just go back to the relationship game or got back to the population game. By normal I mean as they were before. Every time the topic of mgtow was mentioned, arguments of different sides would appear, and this would lead to different sides arguing, which would be a loop meet situation. A loop meet situation is a situation where different ideas are present and you cannot come to a conclusion. You are just stuck in a loop, keep circling around a topic over and over again. The proposed idea was why man and woman were not together anymore was because they were not needy. They did not have need for one another, and there were many alternatives with tech and hookup culture and sexual liberation. mgtow needed the feminists to be free from obligation of marriage, and feminist groups who did not want to get married, who knew mgtow would not marry them. And so many of the ideas which are discussed, the proposed idea why men or women were not. mgtow needed feminists to be free from obligation of marriage, and the feminist group who did not want to get married knew mgtow would not marry them. So this was a benefit between the two groups, as they would not uh, bother each other by marrying each other, because the feminists had a mindset in which they did not want it to be married or were not even suitable in marriages, and the mgtow wanted to be away from such people who would harm their life if they marry them. So these two people knew what they needed, but the problem was that somebody who does not share the resources gets hated, because a person who does not share his resources cannot be exploited with emotion or any other things. So this kind of people are really hated by sociopaths. The one-sided court system and the social structure of trust and belief also made it easier for men to avoid relationships. So the general idea was that the court system did not favor men. It made decisions which lead to many men dying or many men suffering in prison. It often led to decisions which led to children suffering or children dying from bad parenting, and men suffering also and dying with bad decision. Also, there was a story about a man who hanged himself because the court gave the custody to a woman who was unfit um, to take care of the kids. And we don't know that whether these news are genuine or manufactured. We do not know that whether they are created to create a manufactured race or rage or are genuine incidents. Even though the court system has been in a state of kangaroo court, and we cannot deny it, even though we may have actors portraying that a lot of genuine people have their life destroyed by the court system. A lot of innocent people were accused of the trust and belief system, which did not value their life, which destroyed them over allegation. And many exes also did that. They used it to destroy their husbands, their boyfriends, because the court would do that. And it would also give a lot of money in doing that. I mean, via the child support and the alimony system or any other payment system. There are genuine victims, and I'm not denouncing that, but the court system has become ridiculously one sided these days, which is why the men have stopped engaging in relationships. Which made MGTOWs and feminism or anti MGTOWs worse was that the people who were advocating for violence, both groups had damaged people who are screwed by society in some ways, and both groups have been made out to be masterminds, the geniuses of destroying the society, bringing the acceleration, bringing accelerationism. If these individuals were so smart and dangerous, so Mictas and feminisms were complained to be masterminds and genius of destroying the society, bringing accelerationism. If these individuals were so smart and dangerous, why aren't they in positions of actual power? And by that I do not mean appointed power. Actual power and actual agency to make change, not push towards some new world order agenda or some moronic protocols of being proxy group. Like feminism, MGTOW had flaws. It could lead to rooms for cults and deflection towards other group. It was very easy for that to happen, as people in other groups have flaws in their own. They cannot recognize which group allegiance ideology belongs to what group, or which group has what kind of agenda. Some lump similar appearance people into generalized and same group, which makes determining their agendas harder, and it is impossible to criticize certain groups or to praise certain groups. It is argued that the group that can overcome like feminism, MGTOW is an extremely dangerous ideology By dangerous, I mean following it in some context and area could lead people to trouble. Like following the ideology in a state where it is hated could lead to loss of jobs, reputation, extreme character assassination, and guilt by association, which will affect the members who are connected, talked, or even photographed with the person of the ideology. mgtow has been accused of being controlled opposition, psyops, and accelerationist. It is not an ideology suitable for young men or people in general because it stops them from reproducing. The phrase is appropriately titled, Once You Go Red, Plantation is Dead. So, what does it mean by accelerationist? Accelerationist is a person who brings extreme case of bad in society by leading it towards decline because they think that something good can be achieved if the society gets completely destroyed and something beautiful can arise from it. The plantation is the society which produces our food and structure, but it can leave the farmers vulnerable to external forces which enforce the laws of farming. The farmers may lose the farm over legislation or not conforming to the standards of the privileged. The farmers may be moved away from coastal areas or farms, and the tools and living things may be shared by those with authority, and that includes human resource because something bad happened. So, what happens is that if men live from the food production game, if they live from maintaining society and maintaining their women or maintaining their children or just having connection with their family, what is going to happen is that the government will fill up the roles that the men left. And food production is not something you want to give all of it to farming, and fishing is not something you want to give to government or corporations. The farmers may be moved away from coastal areas or farms, and tools and living things may be shared by those with authority, which means that this may lead to a society just because something bad happened and something horrible is happening. Some extreme sort of living would be enforced where people have to share their wives or husband or something like that, and they have to share their foods and tools with government and other human resource. The plantation is society, not necessarily the social hegemony, as some other factors like AI or other people can and will replace those that have left the plantation. It means that if the local men stop reproducing, the immigrants will take their place to reproduce and to replace the old civilization with the new. People think that mgtow, leaving the family building and reproduction population game, would lead to depopulation and destabilization of society. It would lead to heavy depopulation level, and with a middle class to invest on family or a lover, the economy could get badly hurt. Certain things would not be brought much more cause generally mgtow do not spend their resources on other people. The idea is followed of accelerationism is the idea is to break society by increasing the current chaos to bring new society which is better, and mgtow is accused of pushing that. Accelerationism is a generally hated idea as it can lead to participants in trouble or immoral problems. The idea was that people and apocalypse fetishists do great evil to bring goodness and good. Idea is that excess good or bad can lead to apocalypse. Some school of thought think that people must commit acts of evil to bring about greater good. It comes from notion of balance between good and evil. In order for one side to be greater, a balance needs to be formed. So this leads to people committing evil acts, and often secret societies has been blamed for having such kind of ideology. This can bring back things to other people, innocent people, and surroundings. This does not fit the definition of mgtow. On the contrary, it describes the elites more. On the other hand, prostitution, sex, doll, etc. business might have success with people opting out from meet and hook up or woo or marry. Digitalizations of waifus, for example 2D holograms and sex robots, may change the game altogether, or if our nanomachine in brain can generate a partner or give sensual impulses, it can change a lot with population and depopulation. mgtow can discourage young men and children from an early age not to marry. The definition of mgtow on male personality types also creates insult, as mgtow ideology has flaws, and if the wrong person hears it, they would think that they are not capable of having a partner, or they have the wrong personality type, or they do not have the proper tools to get a female or get married. And what it does is destroys families, because the men are not reproducing, they're not conforming to what their parents want them to do, or what the gynocentric environment wants them to do, or what the patriarchal environment wants them to do, which is to reproduce and pass off to the next generation. And it is often encouraged in society and biology for men to have offspring and pass to pass their seed to the next generation. In different cultures it is encouraged. So what happens with a different kind of thinking is that most of the people hear about this thing about male sexual hierarchy and they get confused about it. Some of them think that they are not worth it, or most people think about the mgtow's definition of females, whether you agree it to be true or not. But the ultimate result is people are not marrying when it is surfacing or when it is being discussed, because they do not think they have it in them to marry, or they think that the risk isn't worth taking. So what happens is that it puts some men in a state of depression, which may lead them to think that they are incompetent, or that the women outside do not want them. Thus, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Um, there are counter ideas, but I cannot discuss it because I have plagiarized too much. Actually, it is hard to discuss about it without the key ideals of, without the key way of thinking for mgtow, or the key the key protagonist figures of mgtow. But it is hard to be associated with the key protagonist figures of mgtow because they are really hated and in a person non grata status by the elites, and associating with them could lead me to trouble. It also stops white knighting, which is what we often see in society, and protecting other people, but that has the added benefit of not being scammed into a trap. For example, a person sees somebody getting mugged or a child getting mugged. The reasonable response is to avoid it if it is a bait. There are two options. He could either call the police or to intervene. And even calling the police, if the victims, so-called, if the victims were not real, if they were in on it, they could just lie to the police that the person who saw the mugging harassed them or something like that. And weird level of gaslighting happens in different countries. I don't know what happens in the US or the West, but it certainly happens in the East. Or if a person's car broke down, do you help or not in middle of the road? Do you help in a way that endangers you or your families or your reputation and well-being? What most people do not realize is that they think that mgtows are a bunch of loners, but it is not certainly true, because we have to consider that these people could have girlfriends, these people could have offsprings, and these people have parents. I don't, maybe they do not take care of the parents like the customs is in the West, but they have people they do care for. And when you have people who care for you, you cannot take such a risk that would get you accused of something you did not do, because you have to look at the people who depend on you, whether emotionally or financially. Victors have made a set of serious mistakes, some of which are impossible to mention without naming group, which is a trap in itself. Due to their psychology and certain actions, the mgtow have dug their own graves. By not talking about the elites and the establishment, on one hand, some of them did name the elites. On the other hand, most of them didn't name the elites or other groups. And I'm not naming them because that is not what I do over here. Uh, I'm just I just work on a gaming channel. Politics isn't my forte. By not talking about the elites and establishment, they had lost any support of the people who do talk about the elites and the establishment. Because the core idea is, oh no, this is also somebody else's idea. Okay. Let's just say somebody who compromises and does not tell the whole truth is, it is thought that we should not trust and depend on them because they cannot support when the going gets tough. I did it my best without plagiarizing somebody else. Because by not talking about the elites and only talking about females, they were describing the situation out of context. mgtow chose to not admit the majority women were suffering from news, politics, and elites' actions. This is a common effect because most mgtows are in a state of rage. Not most, I mean, um, several of them. They are in a state of rage. They think that women are all women are in on it, in on the double standard and what the court and the administration is pushing on the males, and they think that all women are benefiting from it. They fail to acknowledge that women are suffering from the political system that is taking away their femininity, and that women are being exploited by the elites that are setting them to a collision course, because ultimately what people want is not any group, like any person with identity like men or women. What they want is something that is just a number and could be used to do heavy labor work or heavy machine maintenance and things like that. So I think I'm talking about other people's idea, but this is very important. This cannot be ignored. They did not think in the new parties and elite section. They did not think in the protection of the elites and feminism. Um, Under the protection of the elites and the feminisms, there women are. Victims do not consider that the feminism can be hijacked, and it could have males and females who might want to abuse the female either physically, mentally, or pushing their ideals or something along the fact of groupthink conformity or even sexual abusement. Somebody could still abuse their power and hurt the junior members. And often we see in things like cliques or sorority, the elders often harass the younger members. And it, it is not out of context that the elites and the feminists could have some people in the higher rankings who do abuse the lower works ones. But since you cannot criticize them without losing your job and reputation, it sets a gateway to years of trauma. And what most people who are get victimized by the elders have no choice but to push this trauma on other group who cannot harm anybody or who chose not to harm anybody. So it is possible the elders or the ones in moreover the power hierarchy, and this could happen in other companies in other environments too, abuse their power and hurt the junior members or exploit them. And potentially this could happen in mgtows too. We could have elder mgtows if they are following something like group or cult. It Since they're ignoring females, there is a perfect opportunity to introduce homosexuality there, and the elders could possibly abuse the youngers or people who are confused or do not have enough ideas to make decisions for themselves. This could potentially happen here, but this happened in these two places. And not, I mean, you know what I mean. And it is perfect because if somebody abuses people in their power, it is hard to criticize them, and they can protect them under different levels and keep on abusing, and the victims would have no choice and they would be labeled as traitors if they do report the abuse. Heavy attack and disgrace often happens to the junior members or even the senior members if they say something the higher upper echelons disagree with. And this happens in different political parties also. This happens in communism and other political parties. This is not something new. With writing a wrong book of origins, committing thought crime, they could suffer. And going that deep in politics by making such deep covert contacts, they cannot get out. Once they're in for life. There is no way out. Non-political or in the hierarchy are in far worse situation. People who are not getting anything for being in the movement or not in the upper hierarchy or in the lower hierarchy and in worse situations. And this means that the ladies and the lads who are not in these political movements are not working for these people directly or not involved in any politics are in very far worse situations because they're often in danger of being hurt or not conforming to larger groups, and with no family or no man to protect them, they're at the mercy of the government or the criminal institute that lays in the area, who are often used to scare people for supporting the government. Such is the case of an individual with no connections or identity. There is no one to protect him, her, or any variety. There is nothing he or she or any other variety can go back to. Perhaps sexual identity would be taken too, or the everything else that makes human human. enabling one form of politics to that level could lead to chance of being sacrificed and being unpersoned when the politically involved lad or lady served the use. And by enabling this form of politics of extremism, what happens is that the intelligence agents or the shields or the subversion agents, they also suffer from it because they get sacrificed to make political headlines. They get sacrificed or unpersoned when they have no longer a use to work for whatever direction the establishment wants to go. Or this does not always mean the government, because the rebellion also works for the elites, and the rebellion and the revolution also serves in the same way, because often in history we see people who do revolutions, they are the first to be killed in guillotine or something like that. So as long as people are useful, and even if people are useful, it has to be noted that in politics they are expendable, so they often get sacrificed or unpersoned, where they lose their identity or people forget that they ever existed. This happens with different news too. Such would be the end result of subversion agents or even national security agents. And this is the sad part, because these people think that they are helping their own and trying to make, I mean, at least in the surface level or the pedestrian level, they're thinking that they're trying to make their nation better or protecting people. But what happens is that these groups are getting used as a means to an end, and what they're actually doing is that they're making things worse by instilling this amount of hatred and this amount of deflection. They're pushing society to a state of chaos. So they are doing accelerationism, whereas they are thinking they're doing de-accelerationism. They're thinking that doing this would protect people, but actually what this is happening is extremism politics is heading towards is that it is pushing normal people, civilian peoples, towards danger, because civilian peoples, most of them are not political. They do not serve any powerful groups, or they are not in that kind of political hierarchy status. So with no one to defend them, they are in most danger. And what these people are doing is deflecting to groups who have nothing to do with the incident, and it is creating a form of extremism hatred, which would lead to problems for other groups. If they are defending the subversion, once the use is done, it would be highly problematic, and most people, most agents, most infiltration agents should always think about this, because it would be highly problematic for someone who knows that much of the inner political system to survive. It doesn't matter whether they're military or not, or how much experience they have. There is one point after doing countless mission, a person becomes expendable. And also the crowd loves a martyr. Such a chance can lead to great conflicts. And these have happened in the past. MGTOWs were trying to make good businesses. However, you cannot get job or do business if you piss off the people who own the job and the businesses by calling out feminism, certain BS in court system, and trust and belief. The MGTOWs have pissed off the elites and some females too. We can agree most females, because criticism is not something most people can handle. And since the court system is doing great favor from one side, this is also helping females who are getting abused by their abusive husbands or things like that. So most females would not take the court system in a negative light. But what is happening is that often what happens, as we saw with the case of the father that killed himself, often the court decides to side with the parent who has no capacity to take care of the child. Often, and most of the time, what the court does is that it destroys the man completely, whereas the legal system was supposed to be impartial. The legal system was supposed to be with due processes, and the legal system was supposed to be blind and follow justice. But what it does is that it promotes double standard and favoritism. mgtow have the highest chance of being in a cult from a certain sects with some politics creeping in, and this happens in internet and different channels because it is really easy to form a cult when certain group of people talk to each other, and it is really easy to turn a truth movement or something on the vein of that to a cult. And it is easy for any agents or subversion agents to pose as a truther and create and brainwash people to form something into cults. So we should not throw that possibility out for mgtows. Following such an ideology can leave somebody naked to the public and being forced to eat excrement. To argue back in a back and forth, or to defend someone in a cult of personality, it is a nightmare scenario. Often, by following cliques, people may support somebody who is in a cult, and they do not even realize that they are in a cult until it is too late. And mgtow have a chance of this happening. The infighting made things worse. Many of the channels changed their names, and what happened was that some of the channels had something like cult following, and it is really easy to put subversion agents there, even though some of people I talk with are not agreeing with that, because the idea was that it is a way of thinking. So if it is a way of thinking, it cannot be subverted. But we have often seen everything in the past history, including religion and other things, that got subverted and inverted. So we should we should not throw mgtow out of the context that it cannot be subverted or corrupted by the elites. It can. This isn't something which has divine authority, and even divine books of divine authority can be misinterpreted by people who does it for political gains or any other gains, and even religions get subverted. mgtows went to research on how the current situation came to be and how the shift and reversal role of power came, and how the gender inversion became a thing, where there are people who believe that women got power by their own merit. Some people researched deep into who funded and supported the movements and where the subversion came from. By digging, they found something disturbing, some disturbing informations and some patterns. Humans have a tendency to look for patterns. As a result, mgtow got a level of awareness. They looked behind the curtain and they did not like what they saw. And no, it was not a woman. What the mgtow discovered in theory is group of men and women, male sociopaths and psychopaths exploiting and manipulating women and weak men, trademark, and other groups with promises of power and privilege, and in some groups they appoint a leader to betray their own country or group for privilege and power. By analyzing white feather movement, it was a clue that society was flawed and people's psychology and sexuality can be used against them to bring great disaster. Um, I'm probably not going to talk about it because it is going to get banned. Some men in mgtow did not wear a mask. They were transparent people that held everybody accountable. They held women accountable for their actions and also the elite accountable for their action. And it is that reason which has made mgtow a target for elimination. They knew too much and they were questioning too much. So basically what happened in the white feather movement was that it happened before World War II, and it was partially continued in sorry, it happened in World War One. Before World War One, it was partially continued in World War Two. What happened was that some people um, asked some people and some ladies, some men people and some ladies people, what they did was that they sent white feather to anybody who did not wanted to join the Great War as a sign of cowardice, or as a sign that they're cowards. And they also sent it to people who did not wear military uniform. By this, they sent hundreds of and thousands of men to war, but they got killed. If in that time there was something that, like mgtow, that questioned everything, none of this would have happened. So basically the politicians use the woman and people's own wives and loved ones to put them in death's door. This is not a good thing, this is an evil thing. And some may argue that war should be glorified, but what happened that it led to hundreds and thousands of people to lose their lives, and it was something that crippled Germany, and the shadow of the war went on in many different countries even after the war was over or the World War II was over. So this was a great evil act, and it was fueled by using the men's and the women's own emotion against them, or their own psychology against them, to be more precise. So MGTOW know too much, they were questioning too much. Since mgtows became truthers, not cult leaders, genuine philosophers who had ideas of how society arrived here and where we will go next, they began to spread their knowledge to others. It was met with lot of hate, not met, I mean, it was met with a lot of hate. The high conflict person argument was something to be considered, as many said. There is a chance of truthers being a sting operation and controlled operation, as such a thought cannot be put under the table. Men are weak to women, some say that men's sexuality is generally different from women. MGTOW had their own perception of femininity and female nature, and this made MGTOW a lot of enemies, not just women, but lots and lots and lots and lots of men. In fact, it is a surprise that most people calling to target MGTOW, while women are generally ignoring or just leaving some critique. The main people asking to harm MGTOWs are generally men, and most of the time controlled oppositions and shields and brainwashed people. Normal people does it too, because there are reasons where this movement is very harmful, but genuine attacks are coming from this type of groups. Some truthers are calling MGTOWs flawed too. They have valid reasons. I'm not saying that truthers are shields, but some shields are using it to deflect the target away from actual problem, or holding weak men and women accountable. MGTOW's framework of female mind could be flawed. Some sects of MGTOW have a generalization in human psychology that all women are the same, and this is debatable. I generally do not agree with this. However, they refer to it as healthy biological females and female with different sexuality and different psychology, different from general, like lady whose brain is wired differently, are different. So even they think that females could be different if their brain is wired differently, or if their sexuality is different. Victor's framework of the male mind is even more hated. Different ones have different ideas, and it is not preferable to show it to a young man or somebody who has not yet had a female partner, because if they see it, some of them think that they are incompetent or use ideas that do not work and may not get female partner for the rest of their lives. Like I said, once you go red, the plantation is dead. Some mgtow's framework or female talks about the materialistic need of the female, which is debated. And there is talk about hypergamy, there will be Y here, which some people inside disagrees with. Some mgtow's framework on female talks about the importance of security of females and female basic needs of physical and emotional attention, loyalty, male cooperation, and male subjugation. One claimed females try to change. Oh, okay. One claimed females try to change the personality type of a person, which leads to disasters. And some framework preferred the assertive guy who holds everybody accountable. Some preferred a pretty guy, which serves the female. So there are difference in narratives in mgtow movements of what type of person gets preferred by the females. Some even could argue that the 3% type of males get preferred by the females. mgtow does not want to serve females or elites or even men. That makes them a threat to the establishment. At its heart, mgtow does not care for female nor what happens to them. It is a defense mechanism and they're busy with themselves and leave women alone. As some people argue, this can also lead to doorways of homosexuality and things which we saw in strict religious background, such as some religions and some churches. This is different from a pickup artist who just want to score, and often the pickup artist is a master cooperator. I'm not saying this about all of them, but often they cooperate. And a political climb. This is different from a pickup artist viewpoint. This is also different from a political climber's viewpoint and a male sociopath's viewpoint. Pickup artists criticized mgtow's lack of understanding women and their problems, which the truthers also criticized and many other people criticized, the social stigma the females face while not complying with what is expected of them in the hive mind society. And it does not matter which side they are, it's all the same. One point that mgtow There is also another argument that is made, which is that no female wants to be wrong in an argument. She has to have it in her way. And the best a man can do in power is to trick the woman, giving an illusion of power. And the lack of convincing the other party and the need to dominate one and another and vice versa sets most problems. And the person who is not contributing to the female is seen as a problem, as a threat, because nothing is worse from the narcissist mgtow who won't share all his cool toys with the woman. The court system could brutally destroy a man, his child. There are stories where a man got in jail for pointing in court that the mother was unfit to raise the kid and the child died after being in the custody of the mother. The court didn't do anything, the man was still in jail, and the man committed suicide. There are cases of men being forced to raise other men's children, alimony and child support, ruining lives of many. The false allegations, the court of public opinion, and the risk to get fired for something he didn't do or change mind of a person of some or if a man has sex with a person consensual, the person changes her mind almost overnight or almost after certain type of years and just accuses him of sexual harassment, which have happened in the past. So this gets men fired from workplace or worse in some cases in the past, maybe even lynched allegedly. Getting fired for irritating the wrong person can have caused the men to go in their own way and minimize their interactions with women. With the amount of cry wolf and the destroyed reputation of men have passed, mgtow do not believe any accusations without hard facts. This makes them both a nuisance and not non-participants in witch hunts. This makes mgtow difficult to be used as a political weapon, even though, since they are in society, we should not leave it out that they cannot be used by political powers as a means to an end. People with harmful psychology and damaging characteristics which can lead to spouse or child living morality or being psychology is another reason why mgtow avoids some women. Because if a person um, engages in a relationship with somebody of a harmful psychology and damaging characteristics, this can lead to problem, whether that person is somebody's parent, mom, or whether that person is somebody's spouse or partner, something like that. Because some partners or some parents can cause great psychological damage, in some cases physical damage, to the child or the lover or the husband or the wife, and this in terms of the elite cause their lack of morality. So elites could be immoral because they have the wrong partners who did great amount of psychological damage in their mind, or this also could happen from family backgrounds. The parents did a great amount of psychological damage on their minds. Interacting with a person that may choose to manipulate the other in the relationship to do immoral acts is another reason why mgtow avoids women to preserve their morality. Remember the white feather movement and what happened with the elites. mgtow does not want to attack or prosecute other men or women and many other variations. Puritans and truthers, however, are targeting mgtows, not all of them. Agents and elites have also planted for conflicts with mgtows and other groups, and some truthers claim that mgtows are controlled oppositions and they are a group manufactured by the elites without looking at the full picture of what is going on, or without holding women accountable, or without seeing how the elites are manipulating the female psychology to screw the males. Even though it is redundant, a group like mgtow is doomed to go out on its own. A feminist can get married and have kids, and a sperm donor can help. Not to mention there won't be a lack of cooperative men in society, or even weak men who can protect themselves. If a large mob took advantage, whether by status, power, or drugs or drinks. So if a large group of females chose to target one man, they would not have problem with reproduction if the elites allowed such kind of political environment. And there is also the government to do something about the reproduction. Mixtures don't reproduce, they don't have a complete family with source of reproduction, because the main character who can produce the children is the female, and the female is being used in the political movements. She's very busy, and MGTOWs do not want to engage with women or even get married. The minds of women and children are very important. The elites know this and shape it as they shape the minds of the males too. The elites know that the female is more important, since a mother can control the future of the nation through her child or the lack thereof. The most important thing for sustainability of a civilization is the female. That is why dividing the gender was important. Without a father at home and without proper guidance, the elite becomes dad, the man of the house. The elite teaches things that leads to destability, division, and depopulation, which is something that was alleged to the education system, which is something that is alleged to the media and many other way of communication. It is very hard to spot the manipulations of a psychopath or a sociopath before it is too late. Very slowly men are starting to realize what they have lost by giving up women, and it is same with women, but the cycle of abuse and the race for dominance would continue. The depopulation problem is a real and serious issue, and many think it is important for the preservation of whole society. They must make whatever abuse happen. So this is the opinion of most people who are trying to force mgtow to come back to the plantation, is that whatever abuse happens, it is all the men's fault. So it is the men's fault what they think, and the men are weak, things like that. And another thing is that the depopulation problem is so great. Even people who were once part of the mgtow have started to think that this must be solved, because if this does not happen, the way of living would end. So whatever abuse happen, they must make. What is happening is a population game to create as many of you as possible before the other group does it. MGTOWs are non-participant of the population game, and there are theories immigrant would replace them as female partners. But what most people fail to realize is that the situation MGTOWs are in. It makes sense many popular people are calling MGTOW out were from a protected class or from financial political status. Many good people are also calling out MGTOWs. And connections who can be saved from accusation, or some who are in a different sexuality than MGTOW themselves. As much as it is interesting for some controlled opposition to claim how it is MGTOW's fault, if one dig deeper, they can find flaws of the complainant too. Ordinary people would say find a parent who is not crazy and marry, but the court system presents itself as bait, and if there is a compatibility problem, there is a huge risk. There would be other ways of getting married, would bring new regulations and other things in the future. But most people think that marriage would have new laws in the future. Some people even think by 2013 people would have to share sexual partners and wives, or some huge license for two people to become one. So there would be a sharing of resources in the future. So some people think by 2030 they would have to share their wives or boyfriends or husbands, something like that, to the other groups in the community. And they would get exchanged so that nobody forms emotional bond with another person. And in the current age, there is no guarantee with harsh economy, uncomfortable political climate, and daily game for character assassination whether marriage is feasible. Some think that it is catch 22. The MGTOWs were accused of not having emotion, whereas they can feel a lot and would not prosecute you for listen and believe. During Jim Crow era and Tulsa riots of the 1921 were cases where female abuse was reported and people prosecuted who were allegedly believed to be innocent. Some argued in some cases the female would cheat, but the supremacist men would think that the girl is pure, so would murder the other guy to prove her purity. Tulsa riots. The riot began over Memorial Day weekend after 19-year-old Dick Rowland, an African American shoe shiner, was accused of assaulting Sarah Page, 70-year-old white elevator operator of a nearby Drexel building. He was taken into custody. A subsequent gathering of angry local Caucasians outside the courthouse where Rowland was being held, and the spread of rumors that he had been lynched, are alarmed the Roker African American population, some of whom arrived in the courthouse armed. Shots were fired and 12 people were killed. As news of their death spread throughout the city, mob violence exploded. Thousands of Caucasians rummaged through the African American neighborhood that night and next day killing men, women, children, burning and looting stores and homes. About 10,000 African American people were left homeless and property damage amounted to more than $1.5 million in real estate, and 750,000 in personal property, 32 million in 2019. August 1914, at the start of World War I, Admiral Charles Friesland founded the Order of the White Feather with the support of prominent author Miss Humphrey Ward, an organization aimed to shame men into enlisting in British Army by persuading women to present them with a white feather if they were not wearing a uniform. Although the draft would conscript both sexes, only men would be at the front lines. The white feather campaign was briefly renewed during World War II. This is the standard and the age Puritans and hypocritic shills wants to bring when they say that mgtow is a psyop and cowards or bots. Good people does it too. I'm not saying they want to bring that standard, but there is the agenda behind everything. Though there is a chance of mgtow, some good truthers also think mgtow is bad. I don't think they're correct, and I do not stand by that. But that does not make them bad people. Though there is a chance of mgtow being a psyop, as the best way for revolution is to lead it themselves. Perhaps the same argument can also be made for the truth movement, who are the revolution and they are deflecting to mgtow to move away from the real problem. Since mgtow are not part of the main political narrative, left or right, they are the enemy. They get shamed and ridiculed to go back into the plantation. But after a mgtow looks at your white feather movement, he looks at your gynocentric Jim Crow. He looks at different cases. A man was screwed by the system. He looks at the Tulsa riots. He looks at the puppet master waging the war deep into the eye, and he says that I'm going to go my own way. I would not fight your wars. I would not become your tools to hurt others. I would rather have death if I don't have my freedom. He ignores the pleas of the grifter. He ignores the pleas of the death merchant. He listens to no one. Perhaps God or perhaps himself he listens to. Even if he is an atheist, even if he is an asshole, Emichow is more moral and ethical than a politician or a political shield, and Emichow has higher moral standards even if he is a weak man than a controlled opposition, a subversion agent. Accusing Emichow of accelerationism is inaccurate as the situation forced their hand, and some people calling it were in privileged class themselves of the elite system themselves who had access to privilege. I'm not talking about the ordinary people that called out MGTOWs. Something that it was manufactured and it could possibly be true as to lead to depopulation as did feminism, and something that this was created to destroy the family unit. They could be proven right. People that called out MGTOW would have their share of vices as fornicators, drug users, people who beat up or threaten other people, substance users, mentally ill people, mentally not stable people who take medications. It is weird how everybody who complains about the main establishments or the elites have some sort of mental problem, or somebody who takes medication, or somebody who could be identified as cults themselves, or opportunistic two-faced assholes or shills who called out other shills in a circle of drama. The Puritans and truthers that blamed MGTOW have taken blame away from female psychology and female accountability and placed it on MGTOW. They have made MGTOW the scapegoat of being weak men that lead society to decline. They have dehumanized MGTOW and pointed the political blame on them, and some agents have done that, pinning their own allegiance to their own master, to MGTOW, who has one or no master. Suppose it is true, but then weak men could not have done the destruction of society themselves. There is always an enabler, whether they are normies or some other group, or allegedly boomer, or allegedly old generation, or allegedly many other groups. But cults of personality have to disrupt the truth movement, and spy agencies have said MGTOW to be today's boogeyman. Tomorrow it could be something else. These people would get new lingo and terms as if to dehumanize them. What the cults of personality and blame shifters are doing is deflecting from the main source of problem. They are engaging in outer jihad instead of focusing on the inner jihad. Instead of judging their own flaws for failing civilization or admitting the flaws and the purity of the lady, they have to make straw men to attack from, and mgtow is the straw man in this case. It is hard to attack as he does not exist. In a state of choosing to serve God and holding men and women accountable for their actions, the truthers and cult of personalities and puritans have taken women as their God, the same idol the elites posted to get in power and they divide the gender. The Puritans have taken women's agency and rights away. They have they have taken women's agency and rights to be held. They have taken their rights to be held accountable and agency away for by Puritans taking the rights of women's agency and their rights to be taken held accountable for actions they have committed. The Puritans have shamed femininity. They have objectified woman as a jasad who has no capacity to think for themselves. And some could argue that they deified their woman as golden calf to bring about cleansing and deflecting conflict, as we can see in the Tulsa riots or the Jim Crow. I do not know that whether the allegations were true or not, whether the crimes did happen or did not happen, because many other such things happened with other groups involved. This could be true or not, but the court of due process is something that got completely thrown out in the situation. And there is a possibility that innocent people can be accused if people do not question the authority of what is going on. And this could lead to a discrimination of a new level. Some argue gynocentric Jim Crow, and even the elites would be affected. Using agents to blame mgtow and truthers to take part in it is the final end of the truth movement. It is the coup de grace. The infighting will destroy any shred of resistance it had. Puritans would burn the world, then rather come in terms with their own sin. It could be controlled oppositions mocking mgtow are mentally unhinged and bad for their surroundings. It could be argued they are replaced by agents to make such points. It could be argued they are enablers of their family and leading them to a dark path towards destruction. Not all people who are disregarding mgtow or saying it is a thing made by the elites are bad people. They have valid points. Some of them I am friends with, some of them I would trust with my life. But the shifting the ball towards the mgtow is a bad idea. It is a terrible idea. In a way, mgtow is made by the elites and how they shifted the political power and enforced new laws, how the elites empowered certain groups and put them in positions of power. This is common with revolution to displace the old people. New people have to be appointed, and poor people are often the first to join civilizations. People who feel neglected, people who feel conflicted. MGTOWs become popular because it gave men a sense of belonging and freedom. It gave them ears to listen to and somebody to support who got marginalized by society. In any revolution, the poor and the oppressed are the first to join. They need somebody to speak for them and treat them as people. That's how Islam was successful in the Middle East, and that is how Moses gained his followers. And some could argue this is how the Christianity became popular, because abused people, neglected people, people who are being harmed in society by tyrants and higher political groups, They saw a movement, they saw an idea that can support them, and they quickly became followers of it. Women felt neglected and abused. That's why they took the power, and the price for it, what was offered. And for a while, for some people, it worked better. However, the subversion has gone to a state where is little benefit for the middle class and just a means to an end for revolutionaries and subversion agents. So, to change the paradigm, both truthers, mgtow, zoomers, and other groups would have to be used as pawns and revolutionaries, and they are key protagonist figures in these movements. So they are being manipulated to fight each other. Some of them could also be shields. Some people are doing it for personal reasons. As a follower of a cult of personality, you would not spot the grifter, not the sting operation, until it is your turn as the scapegoat, and this could happen to the best of the people. The controlled opposition would always claim it is everybody else's fault but his own. He would break his wrong term relations, and his followers would be given terms which is projecting. He is projecting his own faults to his followers, and the followers would leave and get dehumanized. The controlled opposition's group will be used as a hive mind army to attack and discredit other people. It would be used as an army to discredit the movement itself. Movement itself. The male psychopath or sociopath could also directly confront the person. As a healthy male, all words would be weaponized and certain set of extreme ideas and big lie would be used. The sociopath would claim to play a victim. The shield would also claim to be a victim, even though they would start the initial argument and dehumanize the mgtows. Dehumanization of mgtow, however immoral they are, and referring them to as bots, is the same as calling certain people cattle for things they have no control forever. Whatever supremacy or order that tries to discredit people that questions and try to find the truth or held people to the standard of truth and accountability cannot survive, because the supremacy is attacking people who are and trying to discredit the people simply for questioning, asking, and holding people accountable. Their movement would not survive. After mgtows are gone, such people would begin to abuse the females, and the cycle would repeat again. This is not talking about the normal family guys who are criticizing mgtows. A secret agent who achieves victory to deception has no right to tell how wrong mgtow is, as a secret agent is not a moral guardian, nor he is the dad of the mgtow movement or would support the mgtow if he gets sued by court or gets falsely accused of harassment. If they really think they have a right to criticize it, they should put their mouth where their money is and try to use their own money to help people who got screwed by the court system, who lost custody of their child, who are paying thousands and thousands of money in alimony, or people who got falsely accused of things they didn't do. Instead, what your controlled opposition and your shields are doing is that they are only criticizing the men, not helping what kind of trouble they are, and not even trying to understand what kind of situations they were forced in, or even the female who were abused by their spouses were forced in. The agent and Puritan would blame the man for being weak, or he would dehumanize mgtow to be cattle. The friends of such Puritans are tied to the elites themselves and have their own set of flaws. So such people calling mgtows also begs the question of authenticity, as if somebody's friend of political movement that is harmful for men that have same ties to the elites. They should not have the argument of calling mgtow psyop. Imagine if somebody is a friend with a shield and he is calling MGTOW psyop. It does not make any logical sense, and it is like the pot calling the kettle black. Furthermore, if Puritans are claiming politicians they follow are good, the MGTOW and Truther communities think that such politicians part of the elite. It is obvious their word is not credible. So your Puritans who are complaining about the MGTOWs, they follow the politicians who are corrupt, and MGTOWs and Truthers have proved that the political have tied to the elites and they are corrupt. And your Puritans are saying that I support these politicians and I think MGTOW are bad. So how can you support such a immoral bad person and who is political and claim that non-political people are bad? It does not really make you credible. It makes you look like a controlled opposition. The problem is Truther would jump and trust anyone who gives big slogans of naming elites or draining swamp, not realizing he is getting to another swamp or perhaps the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would be the Truthers wanting to throw under the bus in favor of shields just because he names them, or in favor of allying with the female to take down the elites. It would not last, and there would not be any positive effects from it. In fact, we are setting a precedence of witch hunt, which would not end well for all parties involved, certainly not the Puritans. The elites have realized the illusion is not complete, so they allowed people to name them, so they can gather intel on the suckers that fell for it. Now, creating the perfect revolution hive mind, it they will direct the revolution in another direction. And it is possible that MGTOW could be this too. A channel once said that both right and left are after people's rights. The question is which right they will take first. And it was debated by MGTOW that the right would come from men too, and it was just as predicted. If they didn't have the right would come for the men, MGTOW, as well. If they didn't have the money. So in politics, men are not looking that suitable. So, but the right and left, if you can even believe if they exist, have thrown men under the bus. And the truthers are doing it too, very slowly. We can see the O'Sullivan laws creep into it. And this is finally the coup de grace for the truther movement. It would finally end them because they did the one mistake they were not supposed to do. They engaged in cannibalism. Men who do not provide or support family are generally hated in society. It can lead to all sorts of problems. Depopulation is one of the most evil things you can do, but setting extreme rhetoric, perverting religion for political gains, could also lead to the same kind of evil. By annexing, alienating, or kicking MGTOW out of society, what the Puritans are leading them, the MGTOWs, down a dark path. And they themselves are treading to a dark path of extremes with no returns. This would lead to the truth movement in general, as it has taken all the this would lead to the destruction of the truth movement, as it has taken all the credibility the truth movement had and put it to the same Frankfurt School standard as everything else. The MGTOW may have to wear fish symbols to hide their identity and survive, otherwise they would get prosecuted. So people should hide being MGTOW, they might get prosecuted. They should use fish symbols or some other symbols. Let me tell if you get that reference. As many people would look for somebody for society's problem, since MGTOW has no wife, not they are in politics, not they name the elites, not they can reproduce, they will be targeted. Some may even hide who they are. The mgtow abandonment by normies and the political parties is no different than Socrates. Socrates asked youth questions which lead to the corruption of their mind, allegedly. mgtow has done the same, created loads of incel. It has also led to people losing their jobs and livelihood. It has led to conflict. The Puritans who are promiscuous, who may have cases of homosexuality, accuse mgtow of being godless and sinful, as Socrates was announced to be godless. Now, it does not matter what kind of partner a man has or a female has, but if somebody is coming from a promiscuous background, that person should not have an authority to say what is moral or not with somebody who is not promiscuous or with somebody who is not preferring to screw around, because it would lead to a great inversion of society. What would happen is that promiscuous people would think that being promiscuous is good, and they would attack people who are not promiscuous. So what would happen is the total inversion of the medieval society that existed in the West. MGTOWs are not all the same. Some people think that they go with God and the power of God, and it is the power of the God and the lack of participation towards devil, no matter what form has prompted him to possess the mind, to agents to destroy mgtow from inside and outside. Because the mgtow does not follow his biological needs. He tries to do what would benefit him, which what would protect him. What it leads is a great harm to him. What it leads that when somebody does not have that kind of desire, it is hard to approach him or try to corrupt him from that point. So other means are employed. If a woman gets abused by her parents or gets a bad husband that would force her to remarry, if the guy who beat a woman is psychotic and beats a woman, is marriage right for him? If a MKUltra victim chose to go MGTOW, or a feminist who does not marry, can we consider that person to be a coward? If an antisocial person who may harm women is choosing to distance himself from women, who are you to bring him towards that situation? What has given you the right to even call for it? How can you even call yourself a secular country if you cannot tolerate the idealism, or if you cannot tolerate the idea of MGTOW? Then you're just basically being a hypocrite. If a woman does not want to marry or a man does not want to marry, bringing them together is a disaster waiting to happen. Forcing people to stay together is a late night news murder waiting to happen. Not to mention the amount of psychological damage the children would have. Who in their right mind would force something like that? The Puritans would, the controlled opposition would, but what the normal people should try to realize that not everything has to be perfect and done by the book. Some people are different, not everybody is the same. If there is no need for happiness, it cannot be freed. The If men and women are not dependent on each other, you cannot think that the relationship would sustain itself. The depopulation is not the only factor. Eschatology of certain belief claim that the woman will indeed be the future, and some religious apocalyptic pre-note states that gender inversion will happen. And there are other ideas, which is that good will be called bad and bad will be called good. The words of a bad person can destroy the life and reputation of another person. So mean-spirited assholes and shapeshifters would be called good, and MGTOW who wants nothing to do with people would be called bad. If men birth rates drop for older people, or older people and younger people bringing people to war for proving they are not bots or cowards like Wart Feather, what would happen is that it would lead to a decrease in population of men and increase in population of women. The sensible and wise men have found out that they needed women to survive, and some think that both both types of people are needed to unite against the elites. However, some men have decided to serve women and get higher social status to serve women. Some men got enabled by violent women who uses the man's violent tendency on himself and his surroundings. In some way, some cases men chose women as their handlers, whatever rocks your boat. But the prosecution of mgtow is a domino effect. After mgtow, the grifters and truthers will be turned to useful idiots, or the mgtow would be turned or subverted unless they wake up. And Puritans would come for Zoomers or any other group. The primary target would be Zoomers is to separate the truthful man and religion from tech. And there had been agendas to go on it. Many people claim that technology is something that is related with Satanism. Many people claim that technology is related to Kabbalah allegedly. And what happens is that they are trying to bring religious people away from technology. They're trying to claim it as magic so that people get more dumber if they're on the religious side, as if they haven't gone dumb enough. So this is a way to socially engineer the religious people, the Puritans, and this is a way to socially engineer the boomers to become dumb. And same kind of engineering programming would be set on the Zoomers too. And Gen X, no, Gen X grew around technology. I don't think they can do it with Gen X. This happened with another religion which went to the dark age for rejecting science and creativity, and you cannot even put music there because they think it is evil or something. So you will see Christianity enter an age of darkness for the Puritans. And eventually people that call mgtow dehumanizing terms would decree that technology itself, using boiling water, boiling your tea itself, is a sin. They would claim that. It would go to the level of extremity. Somebody would claim Tesla's invention is evil. You would not be allowed to you would not be allowed technology if you are of a certain race. That is the precedence the grifters are bringing, because technology is a sin. They do not want technology to go in the hands of people they do not like. They want somebody to stay as a slave class, and they want the religious people to whom they are selling the idea that technology is evil, technology is something like occultist, technology is Kabbalah, or technology is evil, something like that, or black magic or demonic art, something weird accusations without any form of logic. And the millions of dollar goes into this, millions of false religious people are into it, millions of shields are into it. Because if you are a middle class, if you are a peasant class, you are not supposed to have technology. So your Puritans are going to push that, and they cannot attack all of you at once, so each of you have to be chipped one by one. So the first person getting the chip is the mgtow. So you would not be allowed technology because it is a very powerful weapon. So what they're going to say is that it is a sin. They would give technology and robotization to other people, but that people would be removed far away from the religion, because we already have created division among religion and art, religion and music, religion and people's independence, religion and many other things, religion and law. Now it's the time to create division between religion and technology. Pretty soon they would come to divide religion from common sense. It is happening, and the shields will allow that. So They would claim technology is a sin, wearing glasses is a sin, and things like that. And while at the same time, they would play music videos, so you can hear some music. They would play songs. Next, they would come for the weaves and the anime, the Japanese art and the games. That is something that will get shut down or changed, or the weaves will be destroyed by Puritans or the O'Sullivan's law because they do not conform to their standards. Or the weaves would be deeply influenced by Frankfurt School's teaching, as the anime genre is getting influenced by it. But in the long run, people do not like to see the same kind of things. So if they go full Frankfurt route, it would lead to a state of stale kind of arts like what we saw with Hollywood. The useful idiots would not stop there. They would betray one another and make dramas about it. Then they will definitely go after the gods. Whether the gods are involved in something bad or not, they are going to go after the gods. The occultists, not somebody important, the junior level ones, people wearing weird symbols. The reason for it is they would use the argument of Antichrist, and the symbol of Antichrist is one night. And what happened in modern society is that a lot of people are using one night symbolisms, and some symbolisms can be taken as one night. So if some idiot douchebag or some normal person wears one night symbolism, they might get attacked by such Puritans and they might get in problem. Now, one night is not a good symbolism, but not every person who is one night is the Antichrist. So, what your Puritans are making is a generalization. And what this generalization would do is that if a one night deformed baby gets born, these idiots would murder the baby. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm not trying to offend anyone, but we are kicking the logic out of the window. We are letting fear and illogic and ill the lack of logic and deep emotion to control how the state is going to get run. And this is horrible. The one-eyed fallacy would be used to attack the Vikings and those of Viking lineage. Can you see where I'm going with this? By go, I'm not mean just calling people out, really going after them. Then our Puritans would go after anyone who says magic, and they would still play the music videos, or they would sing songs to you. They will ostracize people for telling. They would sing. I'm not saying they would play other people's music. They're going to literally sing songs to you and play weird music which they created themselves. They would ostracize people for telling jokes and claim to be about free speech. Whatever they say, they would do the exact opposite of it. And they would use some sort of mind control to let you think that they're right, and they would not tolerate any different opinions. The controlled opposition will make anti-establishment a real racist establishment which would eat its own and become more divided, and that is the infiltrators' game plan. So they would do whatever they can to discredit the anti-establishment. They would do whatever they can to disestablish any groups. Eventually, people would have an outburst of social problems because if you don't have mgtow, you are going to have your white feathers, your Tulsa riots, and more great kind of disaster which would be bad for all kind of genders and people involved. You will have your sons snatched from their mothers because the Puritans told you to trust the system, to trust the politicians. mgtows cannot do anything. They are not liars, they are not schemers, they are not politicians. They are men, but without women they are nothing. They would be eliminated and subjugating to the same corruption the Catholic Church monks got when the popular theory of being sexual was to be matured. If men go against nature, there are consequences in long run. But men should not do immoral acts and abuse women, and and men should not abuse men and women for request from his partner or family. Soon feminism would be attacked by Puritans, there would be no accountability, and nanny state would not do anything, as it needs fire for conflict. People are fed up with political correctness. The Puritans and grifters will mobilize such people, such normies, and attack the SJWs. It will be disaster, and it would show how cruel the controlled oppositions and their families are. It would show how bad the anti-establishment are, and the level of cruelty they're going to go is something like the Jonastown's People's Temple or Heaven's Gate, or any other psyop. If you do hear to want to hear their music, you can't, because they would be coming for music and ASMR challenge. Cause ASMR musics or musics could potentially have MK Ultra in it, and what your Puritans would do, they are going to attack music. So you are going to get a deep amount of dark age, which you could see in some countries, some Muslim countries. So the idea is to use your Puritans to bring the same kind of dark age, where the middle class would not be allowed to use the technology or art because it is evil. So by not using technology art, a communication gap would be created. While some music videos and music channels could have M character in it, a lot of innocent channels would be targeted. E celebs and B celebs would be under attack. Artists, singers, cartoonists, animators would get labeled as progressive and worker of elite, an enemy of the people. Then the controlled opposition shall do what they do best, they will clean house. Independent creators would be most affected. By eliminating the independent artists, animators, and creators, they would come for anime and the lollies and the celebs. They will harass them, and white knights would get beaten. If such extremes does happen, Kiwi farms would not have any impact on it, as Kiwi farms do not have the manpower and the resource to expose sparks and to stop them from doing something evil, and they can only make them worse. And it is also possible that Kiwi farms can get um, mobilized by agents, so they would be powerless to talk about such kind of cruelty. If something on the level of Jonastowns or cults do happen, the thing controlled opposition sparks would do would be worse. Anybody exposing such people, such controlled opposition, and sparks would be eliminated. So what controlled oppositions would do is something worse than any Christian incident, as these are highly trained agents. These are not idiots. The controlled opposition should not be thought to be idiots. These are highly trained military people. They have lots of training and lots of manipulation skills. They have lots of achievement under their back, and they will deceive people. So anybody exposing such people, whether for fun or for trolling, will be eliminated. So you should not contact such people, as they are dangerous. They can convince you to go to their sides. It is better to maintain a distance from them. After that, your Puritans and controlled oppositions are going to go after Abrahamic religion, only the pedestrian levels. They would go after Mormon and any other division of the religion. The grifter would blame others for problems and would take belongings of others away. So a key factor is the belongings and property, what people have, what land people have, because certain people should not have land and properties. They would come for them, and the grifters preach about this, but they would come for the people's rents and rights. So in the pedestrian level, pagans, Luciferians, theistic Satanism, Masons, and other secret groups and people of different deities may get subjected to hatred, an attack. I'm not saying whether the groups mentioned are good or bad, they would get affected. Certain sets of people would get attacked by your controlled oppositions and Puritans to bring certain sets of legislation. So if you are on a civilian level or a pedestrian level, you would not be protected because of some political headline which would discredit the truth and anti-established movement has to be made. In a game of finger pointing, it is hard to determine which side is right. You cannot harm someone if you think is wrong. There was a kid in the middle before the Middle Ages who was labeled as an antichrist and he claimed to be God. The Prophet told Umar wanted to kill him. Muhammad said to Umar that it would be wrong to kill the child if he is not Antichrist. It would be wrong to kill him as he is an innocent man. And if that person was an Antichrist, you could not kill him. You cannot debate with an Antichrist or a snake. The best thing to do is to not engage. Because the amount of funding the agent gets for deception is too much. By interacting with a psychopath grifter, you have made yourself a target. If mgtow is not the mark of the beast, it is wrong to attack it. If mgtow is the mark of the beast, you cannot defeat it. Same for Puritans and shields. Conversely, mgtow can become corrupted and agents of subversion and Puritans themselves and do the same things as I have mentioned. Feminism is already in alliance with the politicians, but it would be wrong to assume that the truthers and mgtow would not be given the same privilege to become revolutionary and tip the paradigm upside down again. In politics, nothing is off the table. There is no guarantee that we may get strict blasphemy laws and sexual laws from the elite. Since mgtow are not reproducing, they are a dying ideology anyways, and the government might force people to reproduce. If mgtow and feminism did stand together without one corrupting the other and tolerating their preference, it would be harder to do it would be harder to destroy them. So the argument somebody can make for the Puritans regarding mgtow and feminism, if the mgtow do not kiss and make up, the controlled opposition would force them to. The hegemony created is not as sustainable. When it crashes, people would still point fingers. They do not realize that society needs everyone to function and they need weirdos in society. They need jerks in society. Everything that is on heaven and earth has a purpose. So in this set of having purpose, even mgtow have a purpose. The minds and the wills of every person, including the elites and the people elites, don't consider a person has value. The problem is that it is hard to work a business without sucking up to power, and you as an elite can make mistakes, and the direction the hegemony is going is not sustainable. It is a crashed bridge. Forcing people to cut off ties and self-censoring themselves would not work. The ruling and economic system is flawed. We should be worried of our farmers and fishermen being well fed who are getting removed from coastal areas. Our honor of our women and children is protected or not. We should look at our children. We should look at the First and Second Amendment. Going after Socrates would not solve the fall of the empire. It is the people who are going after mgtows that may lead to intended or unintended accelerationism. I do not agree with mgtow. I think personally the existence of mgtow gives me better advantage at getting sexual encounters or marriage. Who wrote this? No, somebody changed my text. I did not write this. I respect marriage and I support it. I do not condone abuse and force on any person. I only want to serve my creator. I think I need to give something of value if I want something from the other person. I do not want to be the kind of man or father whose next generation curses him when they die. I do not want the same cycle of age hatred which is being occurring with boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, zoomers. I do not want to be I do not want the business platform YouTube to be used as a tool for cults and hype minds to attack independent thinkers. By censoring and banning, you're only proving the other guy right. Instead of following cults, suspicion, hatred, and spying on other people, people should have faith to do good things and advise people to follow truth and patience. Our mind is the most powerful part we have. If we use it for good, we can succeed.